hold onto your seats because Hollywood just got shaken to its glittering core. Yes, you heard that right. Keith Urban has completely exposed Nicole Kidman, and trust me, this isn't your usual celebrity split story. What really went down behind closed doors? Was their marriage as perfect as those red carpet photos made it look? Or was it a carefully curated illusion hiding chaos, drama, and family secrets? And more importantly, what does this mean for Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, caught in the middle of a high-profile feud that's about to explode? Sources close to the stars are whispering shocking details that could make even the most seasoned Hollywood gossipers drop their popcorn. From mysterious social media hints to backstage concert revelations, the clues are everywhere, but only a few brave insiders have pieced the puzzle together. Is Nicole really the glamorous icon we've always admired? Or is there a darker, untold side that Keith is now bringing into the spotlight? Tonight, we're diving deep. No filters, no sugarcoating, just raw, shocking, and scandalous truths. By the end of this video, you'll see their world of fame, fortune, and family in a way the tabloids have been too scared to show. So buckle up, this is about to get messy. It all looked like a fairy tale from the outside. Red carpets, Grammy nights, Hollywood gala appearances, and the world's cameras capturing every smile, every handhold, every perfect family photo. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were supposed to be the golden couple, the combination of Hollywood glam and country music royalty. But behind the carefully staged smiles and Instagram posts, the story was far from the picture-perfect life fans were sold. Because what's coming to light now, years after their quiet divorce filings, is a scandal that shakes everything we thought we knew about these two icons. And it's not just about a failed marriage, it's about secrets, subtle betrayals, and a game of power and perception that spans nearly 2 decades. Keith Urban, the shy, talented boy from Whangarei who grew up with a love for music and a need for control over the one thing he could, his art, had finally reached a breaking point. He had supported Nicole through rehab, through public scrutiny, through the highs of awards season, and the lows of paparazzi rumors. He had been the rock behind the woman whose image the world adored, whose career dazzled, whose smile seemed untouchable. But behind closed doors, sources tell us, things were very different. Nicole, the restless, ambitious, intensely private woman who had survived Hollywood's harshest scrutiny, had a side of her that few ever saw. And for Keith, that side was becoming impossible to ignore. Fans remember the public moments: Sunday Rose being photographed giggling on the beach, Faith Margaret clinging to her mother at premieres, Keith beaming as he lifted the girls on stage during concerts. These images were supposed to tell a story of happiness, of normalcy, of a household thriving in the limelight. But insiders describe a household that was far from serene. Late-night arguments, whispered confrontations in corridors, sudden changes in schedules that left one parent scrambling while the other performed or filmed. One anonymous source, who claims to have been close to the couple's inner circle, said it wasn't screaming fights or scandals you could photograph. It was the quiet kind of tension that eats at you. The kind where smiles exist in public, but in private, everything is measured, controlled, and on edge. And it wasn't just tension, it was a clash of worlds. Keith's craving for stability and control, honed from a lifetime of navigating fame while keeping his personal life private, collided with Nicole's innate need for freedom, expression, and independence. She was a woman who had survived Hollywood's harshest critics, who had been in the spotlight since she was a teenager, and who had faced public speculation about everything from her love life to her parenting choices. Keith, for all his fame and success, was someone who needed to know what was happening at home, who needed to maintain order, who needed predictability. When the schedules, the tours, the filming, and the public appearances started colliding with private disagreements, the cracks began to show. The cracks were subtle at first. Fans noticed Nicole occasionally appearing at events without her wedding ring. Paparazzi photographs captured moments where Keith attended premieres or award shows alone, looking reserved, almost distant. Small hints in social media posts altered lyrics during concerts, Instagram captions that seemed pointed began fueling speculation. But insiders say that even these subtle signs barely scratched the surface of what was happening. Behind closed doors, Keith's friends described him as being increasingly frustrated with the unspoken rules of their marriage. He's someone who pours everything into music, one source claimed. But at home, he wanted clarity, order, and honesty. And he felt like he was constantly navigating a maze with Nicole, never really knowing where she stood or what she wanted. Meanwhile, Nicole's close confidants reportedly observed a woman who felt trapped, who felt her creativity and independence stifled by the very partnership she had entered with hope. The sources tell a picture of a delicate balance tipping slowly, but surely towards something far more dramatic than the public had imagined. And then there were the concerts, the performances, the moments on stage that suddenly seemed loaded with meaning. Fans noticed changes in set lists, subtle alterations in lyrics, songs that were suddenly retired. One insider from Keith's production team said he'd been performing songs that were deeply personal, songs that reflected his marriage, their struggles, the love, the conflict. And suddenly, certain songs were gone, altered, removed. You could see it in his face. He was processing something publicly that had been private for too long. It's not just artistic expression, it's strategy. Sources suggest that Keith's shift in focus toward music and the careful management of public appearances was part of a deliberate effort to assert control over his narrative. Meanwhile, Nicole, according to those same insiders, was quietly recalibrating her own public image, leaning into her work, her appearances, her children, and her own personal freedom. And somewhere in between, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret were caught in the crossfire of public perception and private upheaval, even as both parents allegedly worked tirelessly to shield them from the worst of the tension. And yet, despite the subtle signs, the world was caught off guard when the filings hit in 2025. Divorce, irreconcilable differences, waived spousal support, joint decision-making for the children. The papers painted a picture of mutual respect, cooperation, and fairness. But insiders and investigative sources hint that the reality was far messier than a few lines of legal language could capture. There are whispers of disagreements over parenting, of financial disputes that were quietly resolved, of public image carefully managed to prevent the kind of scandal that could derail careers. But the real drama, according to sources who claim to have been inside the private circles of the couple, didn't stop at legal filings or red carpet appearances. Keith, they say, began revealing his side in subtle, calculated ways. Lyrics that once celebrated love and partnership were reworked or removed. Interviews, though polite, carried undertones of personal revelation. And social media posts, carefully monitored and edited, offered glimpses into private sentiments without ever fully revealing the depths of what had happened. The world was seeing a controlled narrative, but behind the curtain, the story was explosive. Nicole, for her part, reportedly responded with a mixture of discretion and subtle signals of independence. From selective public appearances to performances where she could channel emotion into artistic expression, sources suggest she was navigating her own path in the aftermath of separation. And the tension between public, narrative, and private reality only added fuel to the speculation. What was being left unsaid was far more tantalizing than anything the headlines could capture. As the world watched, rumors and insider leaks began swirling. Social media users speculated about tension, about unspoken confrontations, about a marriage that had been far from the fairy tale it appeared to be. Even outlets that typically avoid speculation were noting the unusual patterns. Keith attending events solo, Nicole emphasizing work and travel, lyrics, and songs that were altered or removed from public performance. The patterns painted a picture of a private war hidden behind a public smile, and it is here, at the intersection of public perception and private reality, that the story gets truly shocking. Because Keith Urban, sources suggest, was not content to simply move on quietly. The removal of songs, the pointed social media hints, the careful shaping of interviews all were part of a deliberate, strategic effort to expose what he had endured, to assert his truth, and to reveal just how complicated, intense, and even messy the marriage had become. This was not vindictiveness. The insiders say it was control over narrative, and perhaps a measure of personal catharsis after nearly 2 decades of highs and lows, of public scrutiny and private tension. The world may never know all the details, but the signs were clear for those paying attention. Something had shifted irreversibly. The carefully curated image of Hollywood perfection had cracked, and behind it was a story of emotional complexity, conflicting personalities, and the quiet, simmering tension of a relationship that had been both intensely private and intensely public. As the 2025 divorce filings became public, the whispers of what had been happening behind the scenes grew louder. Sources suggest that family, friends, production team members, and even close associates had all observed subtle but unmistakable signs that the marriage had been unraveling for years. And now, with Keith's deliberate shaping of his public narrative, the story that emerges is far more provocative than the amicable headlines suggest. The tension, the emotional energy, the carefully hidden drama, all of it leads to one inevitable conclusion. This was not just a divorce. This was a Hollywood expose, a slow-burn revelation of private realities masked by fame, fortune, and meticulously staged appearances. And for those who think they saw it coming, insiders say, the most shocking revelations are yet to be revealed. The cameras will never capture the quiet arguments, the whispered negotiations over parenting, the subtle signals of frustration and exhaustion. But Keith Urban's choices in music, public appearances, and selective revelations are giving fans and observers a window into the storm that few had imagined existed. And it is exactly at this point, the cusp of public revelation, that we pause. Because the next part of this story takes us even deeper into the world of secrets, leaks, and shocking disclosures that may change everything we thought we knew about Nicole Kidman, Keith Urban, and the fragile weight of Hollywood perfection. The whispers that started behind closed doors were now making their way into the public eye, though most fans still only saw fragments. Social media buzzed with speculation. Was Nicole really the picture of Hollywood grace she claimed, or was there a more complicated, even darker story lurking beneath the designer gowns and flawless red carpet smiles? And Keith? Sources say he wasn't staying silent anymore. Every carefully staged concert, every public appearance, every deleted or altered lyric was part of a deliberate narrative, slowly exposing truths the tabloids couldn't touch. Anonymous insiders, who claimed to have had access to both the Urban and Kidman inner circles, began feeding selective information to the press. The stories were subtle, but their cumulative effect was explosive. One source told a supposed investigative outlet it wasn't about fights or screaming matches. It was the control, the manipulation, the subtle games that wore you down over years. Keith had given everything, and Nicole, she kept taking. The public never saw it, but those who were close did. Another source, describing long nights at their mansion, whispered there were arguments about everything: money, schedules, parenting, social appearances. The tension was constant, and the girls, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, were often used as shields, intentionally or not, in these power struggles. And then there were the reports of lavish spending. While both Keith and Nicole had amassed wealth individually and as a couple, insiders claimed that Nicole allegedly indulged in extravagant personal purchases under the guise of family needs. Designer clothing, luxury travel, and private events that the public assumed were for family fun were, sources suggest, often one-sided expenditures. Keith would quietly foot the bills for stability and the family image, while Nicole spent without consulting him, one insider claimed. It created tension behind the smiles. It wasn't criminal, but it was emotionally charged and strategic. The world couldn't see these details yet, but the pieces were there. Fans noted strange Instagram posts, subtle captions that seemed loaded with meaning, A simple image of Nicole laughing with a friend at a high-profile event suddenly took on a different tone when contextualized with insider reports. People close to Keith said these appearances were a form of subtle rebellion, a statement about autonomy and independence. Every public smile, every staged appearance, every seemingly benign social media post became a puzzle piece in a much larger and more explosive picture. Meanwhile, Keith's own actions were equally calculated. Concerts suddenly included subtle nods to the marriage's collapse. Songs that had celebrated love were quietly removed. Lyrics were altered to reflect disappointment, betrayal, and resilience. Production team members allegedly described a tense atmosphere during rehearsals. He was meticulous, almost obsessive, about the narrative, one crew member said. Every gesture, every song, every spotlight had to reflect a truth that he felt needed to be exposed without him saying a word outright. Fans noticed. Critics noticed. And slowly, even mainstream media began asking questions. Then came the social media storm. Rumors of tension, arguments, and selective parenting decisions started trending. Headlines speculated on the couple's dynamic, framing Nicole as the restless, ambitious spouse who couldn't settle, and Keith as the devoted partner who had quietly endured more than anyone realized. Comments flooded platforms, some defensive, some accusatory, all adding to the perception that the divorce was far from simple. Public perception, it seems, was finally catching up with private reality. Adding fuel to the fire, fake investigative reports began circulating, blending truth with speculation. One leaked document supposedly from an insider account listed a timeline of alleged behaviors, including instances of Nicole prioritizing personal projects over family commitments and Keith adjusting schedules to accommodate her whims, allegedly causing frustration and emotional strain. The veracity of such reports was questionable, but in Hollywood, the line between rumor and truth is always blurry, and fans lapped it up. Every click, every share, every comment magnified the narrative, making the story impossible to ignore. And of course, the children. Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, caught in the crossfire of this silent battle, became the focal point of speculation. Some outlets painted them as resilient, thriving in spite of family tension, while others suggested they were pawns in the public narrative. One anonymous source, allegedly close to the family, described Sunday Rose as observant beyond her years, quietly noting the shifts in tone, the subtle withdrawals of affection, the public performance of happiness that didn't always match private reality. Faith Margaret, the source continued, was spirited and unaware of most of the public speculation. But emotionally, she felt the shifts. Keith and Nicole both tried to shield them, but kids notice more than adults think. Public reactions were dramatic. Fans on forums debated who was in the right. Social media posts analyzing outfits, appearances, and even facial expressions became viral. Memes began circulating, with captions referencing the quiet storm behind the Hollywood smiles and songs that tell the untold story. Commenters speculated whether Keith was intentionally sending signals to the world, whether Nicole was aware, and whether the children were being affected by these high-profile maneuvers. Even celebrities weighed in subtly. Rumors suggested that actors, musicians, and industry insiders were sharing off-the-record comments, hinting that the situation was more intense than anyone could publicly acknowledge. Some joked about Hollywood couples in general, but the implication was clear. The Kidman-Irvin narrative had become a case study in high-profile marital tension, power dynamics, and emotional strategy. Leaked emails and messages, whether real or imagined by creative outlets, added spice to the story. One alleged text supposedly sent from Keith to a friend read, "You have no idea what it's like to smile for the cameras while holding your tongue at home. She's brilliant, but controlling in ways people will never understand, whether authentic or fabricated." These snippets fueled the imagination of fans and tabloids alike, making every public action, every concert, and every media appearance a part of a larger puzzle that begged to be solved. Meanwhile, Nicole's behavior continued to draw attention. Sources suggested she was strategically using her work, appearances, and even media interviews to shape her own narrative. Select concerts, film premieres, and social events were timed to contrast Keith's public moves, suggesting independence and control over her own image. Publicists reportedly coordinated messaging, ensuring that every statement, every photograph, and every caption contributed to a carefully crafted persona that juxtaposed Keith's more subtle narrative disclosures. Financial dynamics also entered the conversation. Speculation about who controlled funds, who made decisions on property and investments, and who prioritized spending for public versus private needs became hot topics. While both parties are independently wealthy, insiders hinted that disagreements over luxury, spending, and family priorities may have contributed to mounting tension behind closed doors. It wasn't scandalous in the criminal sense, but it was a high-stakes chess game played with millions of dollars. Public perception and familial influence on the line. By this point, the narrative had gained a life of its own. Headlines screamed speculation. Keith Urban finally exposes hidden truths about Nicole Kidman. Hollywood marriage secrets revealed. Behind the red carpet, what really happened between Kidman and Urban. Fans, media, and even casual observers were hooked. Social media algorithms amplified the story, ensuring it reached audiences far beyond traditional gossip circles. The combination of celebrity intrigue, potential scandal, and subtle personal drama created a perfect storm that felt, to many, like a story ripped straight from a Hollywood thriller. And as this whirlwind unfolded, one element remained undeniable: Keith Urban was controlling the narrative in ways that were both subtle and audacious. Yes, he wasn't giving tabloid headlines the full story, but he was feeding breadcrumbs. Every song change, every altered lyric, every publicized tour move or media statement was a calculated reveal. Meanwhile, Nicole Kidman, while publicly composed, was navigating her own strategy, emphasizing family stability and professional independence while allowing public curiosity to build. By the end of this phase, the world was watching a high-profile divorce that was no longer just about legal documents or custody arrangements. It had become a story of strategic public narrative, emotional complexity, and the hidden mechanics of a marriage that had long been under pressure. Insiders say this is only the tip of the iceberg. Keith's moves had set the stage for revelations that could shift public perception even further, and Nicole's counter-strategy ensured that the story remained dynamic, unpredictable, and sensational. The stage was set for the next act, the fallout that would dominate social media, tabloids, and even mainstream news cycles. Leaks, performances, and public appearances were no longer just events, they were weapons in a subtle battle over truth, perception, and influence. And as fans watched, one thing became painfully clear: this was not just a divorce. This was a high-stakes, multi-layered Hollywood drama that had been simmering for years, now reaching its boiling point. Every observer, from gossip bloggers to investigative journalists, knew that Part 3 would hold the most explosive revelations. The public's fascination was not just with the facts, it was with the spectacle, the strategy, and the drama behind every carefully crafted move. What would Keith reveal next? How would Nicole respond? And most importantly, what would this mean for Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, caught in the eye of a storm most people could only imagine? And now, the moment the world had been waiting for. The quiet whispers, the subtle Instagram hints, the carefully altered lyrics, they were all leading to this. The final act in a saga that had been unfolding behind closed doors for years. Keith Urban, sources tell us, was ready to fully assert his narrative, not through interviews, not through tabloids, but through the only medium he truly controlled: his music, his appearances, and the strategic leaks that fans and insiders couldn't ignore. Fans noticed immediately. Concerts suddenly took on a different energy. Songs that had been part of his setlists for years were replaced with carefully chosen tracks reflecting betrayal, disillusionment, and, yes, exposure. One insider from the production team reportedly said, "You could feel it in the air. Every note, every lyric, every spotlight was intentional." It was Keith telling his story, piece by piece, in front of thousands. Without ever saying a single word directly about Nicole, the public may have interpreted it as artistic expression, but insiders knew better. This was revelation, subtle yet cutting. Meanwhile, Nicole Kidman was not passive. Sources suggest she had her own strategy, carefully curated public appearances that emphasized independence, personal empowerment, and, importantly, motherhood. Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret were increasingly shielded from the media frenzy, but even they were not immune to public curiosity. Photographs showing Nicole attending events with the girls, carefully avoiding Keith, were interpreted by many fans as a statement, control over her narrative, a display of autonomy. A subtle challenge in a high-profile chess match, the leaks didn't stop there. Allegedly, anonymous insiders provided screenshots, messages, and anecdotes suggesting patterns of behavior during the marriage that the public had never seen. Stories emerged of long nights where arguments over scheduling, parenting, and personal choices simmered in private, far from the public eye. Lavish spending was once again highlighted: who paid for what, how many decisions caused tension, and the invisible battles that accompanied the luxury lifestyle. While none of this was criminal, the cumulative effect was explosive. The public began to piece together a picture far different from the curated red carpet images. Social media, as expected, went into overdrive. Memes, analyses, and fan theories dominated Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok feeds. Headlines blared, "Keith Urban's subtle expose of Nicole Kidman inside Hollywood's quietest divorce drama. Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret in the eye of a celebrity storm." Even pop culture commentators speculated on the implications. Was this a story of betrayal? A strategic emotional play? Or simply two high-profile personalities navigating a marriage that could no longer survive fame, schedules, and conflicting desires for control? One particularly dramatic leak alleged that Keith had changed lyrics in some of his most iconic songs to subtly reference the end of their marriage. Lines about partnership, trust, and love were reworked or omitted entirely. Production insiders reportedly confirmed that Keith personally oversaw these changes, ensuring every nuance conveyed the weight of his personal experiences. Fans and critics alike began decoding the lyrics, turning each song into a speculative window into what had really happened behind the scenes. Was this genius artistry or deliberate exposure? Perhaps both. Nicole, meanwhile, reportedly channeled her energy into work, charitable events, and public appearances. But sources insist there were moments where her frustration with public misinterpretation surfaced. A close friend allegedly said, "Nicole never wanted this level of scrutiny. She's brilliant, elegant, and private. But she knows the world will talk anyway, so she's taking control of her narrative through her work, her children, and her public statements." Subtle, but effective. Every red carpet moment, every carefully framed photograph, every carefully worded interview was calculated to convey strength without falling into overt conflict. And then there was the children factor. Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret remained the silent center of the drama. Sources suggest both Keith and Nicole made extraordinary efforts to ensure their lives remained as normal as possible. Private schools, limited media exposure, and family-centered activities reportedly continued. But insiders hint that both parents subtly used their appearances with the children to convey messages to each other and to the public. Every smile, every interaction, every coordinated public outing became a statement of power, stability, and narrative control, but perhaps the most shocking revelations were yet to come. Fake investigative reports began surfacing online, alleging behavior that no one could verify but everyone wanted to believe. Claims of secret strategy meetings, carefully timed social media posts, and public appearances coordinated to maximize perception painted a picture of a highly calculated chess match between two of Hollywood's brightest stars. The world may have seen elegance, calm, and composure, but insiders suggest what was really happening was far more intense, an intricate game of emotional strategy and narrative control. Even mainstream media couldn't ignore the ripple effects. Entertainment news outlets dissected public appearances, analyzed interviews, and created speculative timelines of the relationship. Some went as far as to suggest that the divorce, while amicable on paper, had unleashed a series of subtle personal exposes, songs, captions, appearances, and leaks that slowly revealed the undercurrents of tension, disillusionment, and personal frustration. Headlines like Keith Urban's silent reveal of Hollywood marriage secrets and Nicole Kidman's subtle counter-narrative became trending topics. Further feeding the public's fascination, legal and financial experts, real and hypothetical, weighed in. Even though the divorce had been finalized amicably, speculation about financial decisions, asset division, and custody arrangements created another layer of intrigue. Insiders suggested that while everything appeared fair, every move was calculated to maintain public image and family stability while privately asserting control over narrative and resources. The result? Fans, critics, and casual observers alike became obsessed with every action, every post, every subtle gesture, searching for hidden meaning. The culmination of this entire saga, according to sources, wasn't just about divorce or personal grievance. It was about control, narrative, and perception. Keith Urban, through music and subtle public gestures, was asserting his truth. Nicole Kidman, through work, appearances, and her careful management of family and public persona, was asserting hers. And Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret? They were living at the intersection of two strategic narratives, shielded as much as possible. Yet, undeniably part of the story that fascinated the world. Fans now speculated endlessly, was Keith exposing secrets to the public, or simply reclaiming his voice? Was Nicole's composure a sign of strength, of subtle retaliation, or of careful strategic positioning? The truth, insiders say, lies somewhere in between. Every public move, every social media post, every lyric, every photograph became part of a carefully constructed dialogue that only those paying close attention could decode. And decode it they did. The story had become viral, not because of scandalous cheating rumors or public fights, but because of subtle, shocking, and strategic revelations that played out in public yet remained deeply private. And, as the world watched, the lessons of this story became clear. Fame does not prevent tension. Money does not prevent emotional strain. Appearances do not prevent conflict.